I stood at the gate, my cane sinking slightly into the gravel as the cab drove away. The house before me gleamed a blinding white, spotless and hollow, like a stranger wearing my skin. The porch swing where my husband once kissed my hand was gone. The clock my father built was missing. Even the smell, lemon oil and pine, had been replaced with something sharp and sterile. My daughter-in-law beamed, her voice chirping. "Surprise! We thought you'd love it." But as I stepped inside, every trace of my life, 40 years of love, labor, and memory, was gone. Not remodeled. Erased. Wait. Before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The cab turned off the main road and onto the narrow oak-lined lane that led to Lisa Mitchell's home. The early spring air of Savannah carried the sweet heaviness of azaleas, and for a moment she could almost believe she was returning to the same world she'd left behind. Her hands rested on her worn leather purse, her wedding ring glinting faintly under the sunlight filtering through the moss-draped branches. After 6 weeks in rehab at Sunrise Assisted Living, she dreamed of this moment. The first breath of her own home, the smell of old pine floors and lemon polish, the sound of the porch swing creaking in rhythm with the breeze. The driver pulled up to the gate. Lisa squinted through the window. Something already looked off. The hedge her husband Daniel had planted decades ago was trimmed too neatly, clipped into unnatural precision. The mailbox had been replaced. New, stainless steel, polished to a cold shine. Her stomach gave a faint twist. "Here you go, ma'am," the driver said, hauling her suitcase from the trunk. Lisa stepped out slowly, cane tapping the gravel. The house stood before her like a stranger wearing a familiar face. Gone was the soft cream paint and green shutters. In their place was a blinding, modern white. The wraparound porch looked bare. No swing, no wicker chairs, no flower pots brimming with geraniums. Her throat tightened. Maybe Jason had the place power washed, she thought. Maybe they just tidied up. But when she reached the door, even the doorknob felt different. Sleek chrome instead of brass worn smooth by decades of use. She hesitated only a moment before pushing it open. The smell hit her first. Chemical, sterile, nothing like home. Then the silence. The familiar tick of her father's clock was gone. Her eyes swept the living room, and the breath left her chest. Every trace of her life, her carved mahogany furniture, her needlepoint pillows, the old rug she'd repaired a dozen times, had vanished. In their place, white walls, glass tables, faceless prints in silver frames. The air itself felt cold. Her voice came out a whisper. "What? What happened here?" "Surprise!" Claire's voice sliced through the stillness, bright and chirpy. She appeared from the kitchen, all smiles and lip gloss, holding a sparkling water. "You're home. We thought you'd love it. Clean, modern, easy to move around in. Isn't it wonderful?" Lisa stared, words gathering and dissolving on her tongue. Her eyes darted toward the mantel, where her wedding photo had always stood. It was gone. Instead, there was a single abstract sculpture, sharp and metallic. Her knees weakened. Claire crossed the room, heels clicking against the new polished floors. "We wanted to make it safer for you," she continued breezily. "Open spaces, no clutter. Jason and I hired a designer. Don't you think it looks so much bigger?" Lisa tried to answer, but her throat locked. The woman talking to her wasn't cruel. She was casual, unthinking, as if she'd done Lisa a favor. That made it worse. "Where are my things?" Lisa managed finally, her voice thin. "Oh, the old furniture? We donated most of it. Some of it was really falling apart, Mom," Claire said, smiling the way one might when talking to a child. "You'll thank us later. It was time for a fresh start." A sound pressed against Lisa's chest, a dull, rising hum of disbelief and grief. Her gaze flicked toward the staircase, remembering the framed photographs that once climbed the wall. Daniel in uniform, Jason's high school graduation, Emily as a baby swaddled in the quilt her mother had stitched by hand. The wall was blank now, utterly blank. Jason appeared then, hovering near the kitchen archway. "Hey, Mom," he said softly, his eyes darting between the two women. "We just wanted you comfortable when you got back." Comfortable. The word made her skin prickle. She took a step toward him, searching his face for a trace of understanding. He looked away. "Do you like it, Grandma?" Emily's voice piped up from the hallway. She ran forward, hesitant but eager for approval. She was growing fast, taller now, with the same dark eyes Daniel had once had. Lisa's heart squeezed. "It's different," Lisa said, forcing a trembling smile. Claire clapped her hands together. "Exactly. Different in the best way. You can finally live without worrying about all that old stuff gathering dust." Lisa felt the smile crack at the corners. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She reached out, brushing her fingers over the glossy white wall where Daniel's shadow seemed still to linger, faint and stubborn. Her home, the one she had kept alive through hurricanes, heartbreak, and years of loneliness, had been gutted in her absence, its soul stripped bare. She began, but the words wouldn't come. Claire was still talking, her voice a stream of cheerful justifications that Lisa no longer heard. The room blurred at the edges, the brightness stabbing at her eyes. Her hand trembled as she pressed it to her chest. She felt the grief rise again, deep and heavy, the same hollow ache she'd felt the day Daniel died. Only now, it wasn't death that had taken him from her. It was carelessness. She turned away from them, her voice barely audible. "I need a moment." Claire blinked, puzzled. "Oh, don't be emotional, Lisa. It's just decor." Lisa's cane struck the floor once, a soft but final sound. "No," she whispered, eyes dark and steady. "It's not." The room went still, the bright afternoon light cutting through the silence like a blade. And for the first time since she'd walked through the door, Lisa realized something cold and certain. This wasn't her home anymore, but she wasn't done with it yet. The house creaked differently now. Every sound felt unfamiliar, an echo where warmth used to be. Lisa's cane clicked against the hardwood as she moved slowly down the hall, each step stirring a fresh wave of disbelief. The air was too still, too clean. Like a showroom pretending to be a home. She paused at the dining room doorway. It was unrecognizable. Her mother's oak table, scarred, solid, full of history, was gone. In its place stood a slab of glass balanced on metal legs. The floral curtains were replaced by gauzy white panels that hung limp and characterless. Even the chandelier Daniel had rewired himself was missing, replaced by a geometric light fixture that looked more like a sculpture than something meant to illuminate supper. Jason followed behind her, hands in his pockets, voice cautious. "Mom, try to see the positives. It's safer now. No clutter, wider walkways, better lighting." "Claire thought about all of that for you." Lisa turned to him. "Safer?" she echoed, her voice quiet but sharp. "Jason, your father refinished those floors with his own hands. That table hosted every Thanksgiving since you were a boy." He winced and looked away, as though the memory embarrassed him. "I know, but things change." "Things don't just change," she said, the edge in her tone soft but unmistakable. "People decide to change them." From the living room, Claire's voice chimed like wind chimes too bright in a storm. "We went for a full open-concept look," she called out, oblivious to the tension. "It really makes the space flow, don't you think?" Lisa's jaw tightened. Flow. That was what they called this? Empty space and cold lines where stories used to live? She moved to the mantel again, almost by instinct, searching for the clock her father had built in 1954, the one that chimed off key, but perfectly marked the rhythm of her days. Her gaze met only smooth white wall and the same sterile sculpture from before. Her breath caught. "Where's my father's clock?" Claire reappeared, holding her phone like a prop. "Oh, that old thing? It didn't match the new design. We put it in storage somewhere. Don't worry, it's safe." Lisa stared at her. "In storage where?" Claire shrugged, scrolling through her screen. "Jason handled that, didn't you, honey?" Jason's silence said enough. He didn't even look up. Lisa turned back toward the hall, her hand trembling slightly as it traced the banister, no longer the dark, glossy mahogany Daniel had chosen, but painted over in pale gray. Every stroke of paint felt like an erasure. Behind her, Emily's voice broke through, small and hesitant. "Grandma?" Lisa looked down. The girl's expression was conflicted, her eyes darting toward her mother and back again. "I liked it better before," she whispered, barely audible. Something inside Lisa softened, then immediately hardened again when Claire's head snapped up. "Emily," Claire said sharply, her voice sugar-coated with warning. "That's not a kind thing to say when your father and I worked so hard." Emily's cheeks flushed. "I just meant—" "I don't want to hear it," Claire interrupted, her smile brittle. "Go upstairs and check on your homework." The girl hesitated, eyes pleading toward Lisa before she obeyed. The soft patter of her feet on the stairs faded into silence. Lisa's fingers clenched around her cane until her knuckles whitened. "You didn't just change the furniture," she said quietly. Claire tilted her head, feigning confusion. "I'm sorry?" Lisa took a slow breath, her voice low but steady now. "You changed us. You took something that wasn't yours to touch." For the first time, Claire's smile faltered. "Lisa, it's just a house." "No," Lisa said, the word sharp as glass. "It's not." The air between them thickened. Jason shifted awkwardly near the wall, torn between them, his loyalty a silent wound. Outside, the sound of a distant wind chime rattled against the porch, faint but insistent, one of the few remnants they hadn't stripped away. Lisa turned her gaze toward the staircase where the empty wall gaped like a missing tooth. A memory rose, Daniel's laughter echoing as he hammered the nail for that first family portrait. The echo faded, replaced by the sterile hush of Claire's renovation. She steadied herself, voice low enough that only she could hear. "You didn't just redecorate," she murmured. "You buried me alive." Claire frowned, half amused, half irritated. "What was that?" Lisa looked up, meeting her daughter-in-law's eyes with a calm that was almost dangerous. "Nothing," she said smoothly, forcing her lips into a polite smile. "Just thinking about what's missing." Then she turned away, her cane tapping rhythmically as she moved down the hall toward the closed attic door. Her mind was already beginning to turn, not on grief, but on what had been taken and how to get it back. Outside, thunder grumbled faintly over the savanna marshes, low and promising. And inside the house that no longer felt like hers, Lisa Mitchell took her first step toward reclaiming it. The new bedroom felt like a hotel room someone had abandoned halfway through a stay. The sheets were crisp, white, unwrinkled, soulless. Lisa sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress too firm beneath her, the faint scent of synthetic linen stinging her nose. The moonlight pooled coldly across the minimalist dresser, gleaming against the chrome handles. There wasn't a single photograph in sight. She reached toward the nightstand out of habit, her fingers brushing air where the ceramic lamp Daniel had bought from a local crafts fair used to be. In its place was a sleek cylinder of frosted glass. When she turned it on, the light was sterile, blue-tinged, like a hospital corridor. She turned it off immediately. Lisa lay back, eyes open to the dark. She could still map the old room in her mind. The rose-patterned wallpaper Daniel had hated but never complained about. The built-in shelves he'd spent a week installing so she could line them with books and framed memories. The shelves were gone now, replaced by a single floating plank that held a sculptural vase, empty. Her mind slipped into the past without her permission. The sound of a hammer tapping, Daniel whistling off-key to a Sinatra tune, the scent of sawdust thick in the air. He'd looked up at her, sweat beading on his forehead, grinning like a boy. "You're going to fill these shelves so full they'll bend," he'd teased. "Maybe," she'd said, handing him a glass of lemonade. "But at least it'll be ours." He'd kissed her wrist, just a brush of gratitude, and said, "This room will hold us long after I'm gone." The memory tightened in her chest until she sat upright, gasping. The silence around her was so complete it pressed against her ears. Even the comforting creak of the old ceiling beams had been smoothed away in renovation. She got up, restless, and crossed the room. Her reflection in the large, frameless mirror startled her. A ghost in her own house. The woman staring back was older than she remembered. Her grief mapped in fine lines around her mouth and eyes. Lisa pulled her cardigan tighter and opened the door quietly. The hallway lights glowed with that same icy hue. Every surface looked untouched, as if life itself had been cleaned out along with her furniture. Downstairs, she avoided the living room. It felt like trespassing. Instead, she found her way to the back door, unlocked it, and stepped into the night. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of wet grass and river salt. Across the fence, the soft glow of Harold Green's porch light flickered. He was up, as usual, an old man who never really slept, nursing late-night coffee and watching the world settle. Lisa hesitated, then called out softly, "Harold?" He turned in surprise, then stood, setting down his mug. "Lisa? Lord, I didn't think you'd be back till tomorrow." "I came home this afternoon," she said, her voice small. "If you can call it home anymore." He frowned, stepping closer to the fence. "I was going to come by to check on you, but—" His eyes drifted over her shoulder toward the house. "Good God, what did they do?" Lisa followed his gaze. From this distance, the windows glowed cold white, like the inside of a refrigerator. "They call it open concept," she said, almost laughing but not quite. "I call it erased." Harold shook his head slowly. "They ripped out all your history." The truth in his words hit her like a bruise. She lowered herself onto the porch step, the wood smooth where it used to be splintered. "I feel like a guest," she murmured. "In my own house." Harold's jaw tightened. "You don't have to take that lying down, Lisa. You built that home with Daniel. It's yours." Her eyes lifted to meet his, steady, sorrowful, and tired. "They say it's safer this way," she said softly. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I was foolish to think I could hold on to the past." Harold leaned forward on the fence rail, his voice firm. "The past isn't the problem. People who forget where they come from are." Lisa let out a long breath, staring at the glowing house. Each window was a mirror of everything she'd lost. Daniel's warmth, her family's roots, her own sense of belonging. The house stood polished and perfect, but dead inside. A low wind rustled the magnolia tree, scattering pale petals across the porch like ghosts. She rose slowly, a flicker of something sharp and alive stirring beneath her grief. "You're right," she said. "I've been too quiet." Harold gave a small nod, reading the shift in her tone. "Good, because they're counting on that quiet." Lisa's gaze lingered on the house one last time before she turned toward the door. Inside, the newness gleamed back at her, cold, unfeeling, temporary. But beneath the white paint and designer fixtures, she could still feel the heartbeat of what used to be. She whispered to it, almost under her breath, "I'm still here." Then, for the first time since coming home, a plan began to form. Small, dangerous, and inevitable. Morning light cut through the blinds in hard, sterile lines, just like everything else in the house. Lisa stood in the hallway, clutching her cane, her mind still restless from the night before. Sleep had eluded her. Instead, she'd replayed Harold's words over and over until they settled into something more than comfort. They'd become instruction. Now, as the house stirred awake, she heard Claire's heels clicking somewhere downstairs, Jason's low murmur, and the faint, happy hum of Emily getting ready for school. The normalcy of it made her skin prickle. She moved toward the attic door at the end of the hallway, the one she'd barely glanced at since returning. When she tugged the cord, the wooden ladder creaked down. A puff of stale dust drifted through the beam of light. She climbed slowly, every step echoing like a heartbeat. The attic used to be her archive. Carefully stacked boxes labeled in her neat handwriting. Mitchell family photos, 1940s 80s, Mom's quilts, Daniel's tools, Christmas china. She could remember the smell of cedar, the cool air, the comfort of knowing her life was stored here. Safe. But when she reached the top, her stomach dropped. The floor was nearly bare. The rows of boxes were gone. Only a few unlabeled bins remained, stacked haphazardly. The space felt hollow, violated. She crossed to the back corner where her mother's quilts should have been, and found nothing but a pale square of dust where the box had once sat. Lisa's voice cracked through the emptiness. No. She rummaged through what was left, miscellaneous wrapping paper, an old extension cord, a chipped mug. None of it mattered. The things that did matter. The clock, the quilt, the framed letters from Daniel, were missing. Gone without her knowing. A sound from below broke her trance. Claire calling up from the hallway. Lisa! What are you doing up there? Lisa swallowed the rising panic and steadied her breath. Checking something. Claire's voice carried that chirpy condescension Lisa was learning to hate. Oh, don't worry about the attic. It was too dusty. I cleared most of it out while you were gone. Had to make space for the new HVAC unit. Lisa froze. Cleared it out. Just like that. Decades erased for the sake of convenience. She descended slowly, her pulse thudding. Claire stood at the bottom of the ladder holding her ever-present tablet, dressed in a silk blouse too crisp for a Saturday morning. What did you clear out? Lisa asked evenly. Oh, mostly junk, Claire said with a shrug. Old linens, broken frames, random furniture pieces. I donated what I could. She smiled, that same hollow brightness. You should thank me. It was a total dust trap up there. Lisa's grip tightened on her cane. You went through my things? Claire blinked, as though she didn't understand why that would even be a question. They were just old boxes. I thought we agreed to make this place more livable. Before Lisa could answer, Jason wandered in from the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, already sensing the tension. What's going on? Nothing, Claire said quickly. Your mom's upset about the attic. Jason's brow furrowed. Mom, Claire only meant... Lisa cut him off with a look. You let her do it? He opened his mouth, then shut it again, his gaze dropping. That was her answer. Her hands trembled as she brushed past them, retreating toward the living room. She needed air, space, something real to ground her. Sitting down on the new, sterile couch, she reached for her phone, a lifeline she barely used. She opened the browser, fingers hesitant at first, then decisive. She typed vintage quilt Savannah, Georgia for sale, the page filled with listings. And then, halfway down, one stopped her heart. A patchwork quilt, rose and cream triangles, hand-stitched with tiny initials in the corner. EM, her mother's initials, the pattern unmistakable. Her throat closed. The listing photo showed it spread on some stranger's bed, tagged 120, excellent condition, lightware, one of a kind. The seller's name, Claire M. Her pulse hammered in her ears. The phone slipped slightly in her shaking hand. She wanted to scream, but the sound stayed trapped somewhere beneath her ribs. Lisa? Jason's voice drifted from the doorway, uncertain. She turned the screen toward him. Do you see this? He leaned closer, eyes widening. Claire, you didn't actually sell... Claire laughed lightly, waving a hand. Oh, for heaven's sake, it's just an old quilt. You said your mom wouldn't notice. Jason's face went pale. I didn't say that. Yes, you did, she snapped. You told me she didn't care about clutter. Lisa stood. That was my mother's, she said quietly. Her hands made every stitch. Claire rolled her eyes. Lisa, don't be dramatic. It was collecting dust. Someone else can appreciate it now. Lisa's vision blurred for a moment, not with tears, but fury. It came cold, steady, the kind that didn't burn out. Jason reached for her arm. Mom, please, let's talk about this. She pulled away, her voice low and final. There's nothing to talk about. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Claire looked vaguely irritated, Jason defeated. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator, a modern one, gleaming and lifeless like everything else. Lisa lifted her chin, the calm in her tone almost frightening. You've taken enough from me. Then, softer, almost to herself, she whispered. Not anymore. The air in the room shifted, colder, charged. Claire sensed it too. Her smile faltered for the briefest second. Outside, thunder rolled again over Savannah, closer this time. Lisa turned toward the window, eyes fixed on the horizon. What had been stolen wasn't just property. It was lineage, love, memory, and she intended to take it all back. The storm had passed overnight, but the air the next morning still felt charged, heavy with something unresolved. Lisa moved through the house silently, a ghost among ghosts. The new furniture gleamed. The white walls still smelled of fresh paint, but everything beneath that polish felt rotten. Emily sat at the kitchen island, eating cereal and sketching in her notebook. Claire had already left for her morning Pilates class, and Jason was outside loading boxes into his truck. For once, the house was quiet enough to breathe. Lisa poured herself coffee, its warmth doing little to thaw the cold inside her chest. Emily looked up, hesitant, her eyes flicking toward her grandmother like she wanted to speak, but didn't know if she should. Lisa pulled out the stool across from her. Sweetheart, she said softly, can I ask you something? Emily nodded, spoon still halfway to her mouth. Your mom. Lisa paused, choosing her words carefully. When she cleared out the attic, did she say anything about the things she took? Emily's face changed, small guilt and fear flickering across it like sunlight through blinds. She looked down at her cereal, stirring it absently. She said it was just junk. She said you wouldn't care. Lisa's chest tightened. And what did you think? The girl hesitated. Then, in a whisper, I didn't think it was junk. Lisa reached across the island and touched her granddaughter's hand gently. Memories aren't junk, sweetheart. They're the only things we can't replace. Emily's eyes lifted to hers, wide and earnest. She made fun of them sometimes, she said quietly. The old photos, the quilts. She said the house looked like a museum. She said you were stuck in the past. Lisa forced her voice steady, though something cracked deep inside. Your mother likes everything shiny and new, but shiny doesn't last. Emily bit her lip, then leaned forward, whispering like she was sharing a secret. I saw her sell stuff on her phone. She took pictures in the attic before you came home. The words hit like ice water. Lisa drew in a slow, measured breath, trying not to let her anger show. Did she say where? Emily shook her head. Just online. But she told me not to tell. Lisa nodded slowly, squeezing her hand once. You did the right thing. They sat in silence for a moment, the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the space between them. Then Lisa smiled faintly. You've always had your grandfather's honesty. He'd be proud of you. Emily returned the smile, small but genuine. He used to tell stories about this house, she said. How he fixed the roof in that big storm. How he carved your initials in the porch step. Lisa felt her throat tighten again. He wanted this house to live on, no matter what happened to us. Before Emily could answer, Jason came in through the side door, wiping his hands. Mom, you all right? You've been quiet since yesterday. Lisa looked up, her tone calm but clipped. I'm fine, just remembering. Jason's eyes flickered uneasily. Claire didn't mean any harm. You know how she gets... She likes order. Order, Lisa repeated. That's one word for it. He shifted awkwardly. I'll talk to her again. Lisa gave him a polite, empty smile. No, Jason, you won't. He frowned, confused, but she turned away before he could respond. By late afternoon, she'd crossed the street to Harold's workshop. The scent of sawdust and oil hit her like an old song. Harold was bent over a workbench, sanding a strip of oak. Well, if it isn't the lady of the house, he said, straightening. You look like someone with something on her mind. Lisa handed him a manila folder she'd started that morning. Inside were printouts of the online listings she'd found, along with handwritten notes of missing items. I need proof, she said simply. Photos, receipts, anything that shows what was mine. Harold flipped through the pages, his expression darkening. She's bold. I'll give her that. I don't want bold, Lisa said. I want justice. He nodded, setting the papers aside. You'll have it. I've still got the old Neighborhood Association newsletter from when you and Daniel restored that porch. Might have photos you can use. A small spark flickered behind Lisa's eyes. That would help. As she left, the late sunlight cut through the magnolias, painting the old house gold. For the first time in days, it looked less like a tomb and more like something that could still be saved. That night, she sat at her new, soulless desk, the glow of her laptop casting pale light across the room. She opened an old wooden box, the one Claire had somehow missed, and pulled out a stack of Daniel's letters. The paper smelled faintly of cedar and thyme. She unfolded one, written in his neat, slanted hand. Keep the house alive, Liz. It's more than wooden walls. It's where we live when the world forgets us. She read the line twice, then 3 times. A calmness spread through her, steady and absolute. She took out her journal and opened to a clean page. In her looping script, she wrote, They think I'm powerless. The pen hovered for a moment, then moved again. Firmer this time. They're wrong. Outside, another storm gathered on the horizon, faint lightning flashing over the marsh. Lisa didn't flinch. For the first time since coming home, she didn't feel small. She felt ready. By evening, the house glittered with the shallow shine of company. Candlelight flickered off glassware, bouncing coldly against the sterile white walls. Claire had organized an impromptu dinner for a few neighbors. An excuse, Lisa suspected, to parade the new look of the Mitchell home. Lisa had wanted to decline, but when Jason asked her to stay, It'll look strange if you hide upstairs, Mom, she'd agreed, her tone neutral. There was no point arguing now. Not yet. Claire's laughter carried from the dining room as she topped off wine glasses. We really wanted to give the place some breathing room, she said brightly, gesturing toward the vaulted ceiling. Can you believe it was all closed off before? Dark as a cave. Lisa sat at the far end of the table, her plate mostly untouched. She watched Claire perform, one manicured hand sweeping through the air like a realtor on a mission. Every word was polished, every gesture rehearsed. The guests murmured approvingly, neighbors from 2 doors down, a couple Lisa barely knew. "It's stunning, Claire," the woman said, smiling. "So modern. You must have gutted half the place." "Practically," Claire said with a laugh, "but it was worth it. We wanted it to feel alive again." Alive. The word made Lisa's jaw tighten. She stared at the walls, at the empty spaces where photographs had once hung. Wedding pictures, family reunions, moments that had given this house its pulse. Now, all she could feel was a kind of clinical heartbeat, steady and meaningless. Jason sat beside his wife, smiling politely, nodding at the right cues but not really present. His fork moved absently through his food, shoulders hunched as though he wanted to vanish between the courses. "And that old wood furniture," Claire continued, oblivious. "So heavy, so outdated. Everything here is lighter now, cleaner. My designer said it's important for mental clarity." Lisa finally looked up, her voice even. "And history?" The table went still for half a beat. Claire blinked, her smile tightening. "Excuse me? Does your designer recommend erasing that too?" The silence stretched, uncomfortable. One of the guests let out a small laugh to diffuse the tension, but no one spoke again right away. Claire tilted her head, lips still fixed in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You know, Lisa, not everyone wants to live in the past. Sometimes letting go is healthy." Lisa set down her fork carefully, the metal clicking against the plate. "Letting go," she repeated softly, as though tasting the words. "Or throwing away what you didn't build?" Jason's hand twitched on his napkin. "Mom," he murmured, low and pleading, "let's not—" But Claire interrupted, voice sugar-sweet and razor-edged. "It's just a house, Lisa. You're taking it too personally." Lisa smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't forgive. "I suppose that's easier to say when it isn't yours." Claire laughed too loudly, forcing lightness back into the room. "Oh, don't be dramatic. Everyone loves the update. Don't you?" she asked the table. The neighbors nodded, murmuring agreement. Someone complimented the backsplash. Another admired the new lighting. Lisa let them chatter. She lifted her wine glass, letting the stem cool her fingers, her eyes never leaving Claire. Every word the woman said only clarified what Lisa already knew. Claire wasn't just thoughtless. She was proud of her destruction. Emily, quiet until now, leaned toward Lisa and whispered, "Grandma's mad." Lisa turned, her expression softening for the girl. "No, honey," she said quietly enough for only Emily to hear. "I'm just thinking." "About what?" Lisa's gaze slid back to Claire, who was laughing again, basking in the approval of her little audience. The candlelight caught in her wine glass, painting her smile gold and hollow. "About fixing mistakes," Lisa murmured. Emily tilted her head, not understanding, but Lisa's hand found hers beneath the table. Her grip was warm, steady. Across the room, Claire stood to clear the plates, still talking, still performing. She had no idea that the woman sitting silently at the far end of the table had already begun writing her undoing in her head. Lisa looked around the table one last time, at the strangers admiring what used to be her home. The white walls gleamed, the air hummed with false cheer, and she felt the faintest, calmest smile tug at her lips. "Excuse me," she said softly, standing. "I think I've seen enough." Claire turned, frowning slightly. "Already? We haven't even—" But Lisa was already walking out, her cane striking the floor with measured rhythm, her back straight. Upstairs, in the quiet of her bedroom, she opened her journal again. The same one that held Daniel's letters and her first declaration of defiance. She wrote just one new line beneath it, in steady ink. "She thinks she's won. Good. Let her." Outside, the cicadas screamed under the humid savanna night, and the storm clouds returned, low and dark over the marsh. The next morning, Savannah wore a pale, restless sky, the kind that promised rain but hadn't yet decided when to fall. Lisa sat in the back of a taxi, her journal clutched tightly in her lap. She'd written and rewritten the same line before leaving the house. She thinks she's won. Good. Letter. The cab wound through the historic district, past Spanish moss and old brick facades, until it stopped before a narrow two-story building with a bronze plaque, Foster and Givens, attorneys at law. The letters gleamed like quiet authority. Lisa stepped out slowly, cane in one hand, resolve in the other. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and old books, comforting, grounded, real. The receptionist, a woman with kind eyes, smiled when Lisa gave her name. "Ms. Foster is expecting you," she said, ushering her toward a glass door. Linda Foster looked up from her desk as Lisa entered. She was in her 50s, sharp gray eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses, her salt and pepper hair cut neatly short. There was something immediately reassuring about her, steady, unhurried, the sort of person who never raised her voice because she never needed to. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, standing to shake her hand. "Please sit. I've heard a little about your situation from your neighbor, Mr. Green." Lisa blinked in surprise. "Harold called you?" Linda smiled faintly. "He's an old client. Said you might be in need of some advice, and maybe a little backbone behind it." A small laugh escaped Lisa before she could stop it. "That sounds like him." "Tell me what happened," Linda said, gesturing for her to begin. For the next half hour, Lisa spoke, quietly at first, then with growing conviction. She described the renovations, the missing heirlooms, the online listings under Claire's name. Linda listened without interrupting, only nodding occasionally, her pen moving briskly across a yellow legal pad. When Lisa's voice finally faltered, Linda leaned back in her chair. "Do you have any idea who's listed on the property deed?" she asked. Lisa frowned. "Daniel bought the house in '84, but after he passed, it went to me. Jason was still in college. I've paid the taxes every year since." Linda opened a file drawer and pulled out a folder. "I already pulled the records." She slid a copy of the deed across the desk. "Your name is the only one on it, sole ownership." Lisa stared at the document. Her pulse quickened as she traced her own signature, faded but unmistakable. Lisa M. Mitchell. "So legally," Linda continued, tapping the page with her pen, "they had no right to make any structural changes, renovations, or to sell property without your written consent. Every one of those actions constitutes damage to your estate." Lisa's breath hitched. Relief surged through her, but it was tangled with something darker, sharper. Anger, clean and overdue. She sat back, voice steady. "So, this isn't just disrespect. It's theft." Linda nodded. "It is. And you have grounds to demand restitution, possibly even criminal charges if any financial harm can be shown." The words criminal charges echoed in Lisa's mind. She hadn't realized, until that moment, how much of her grief had been tied to feeling powerless. And now, power was right there, in black and white, in her hands. Linda leaned forward. "The first step is documentation. Every missing item, every photograph, every purchase record or receipt you can find. The more complete the picture, the stronger your claim." Lisa opened her folder, the one she'd started with Harold's help, and slid it across the desk. "I've already begun." Linda flipped through it, eyebrows lifting with approval. "Good. Organized. That'll make my job easier." Lisa allowed herself a small smile. "I've had practice keeping things in order." "Then let's keep going," Linda said. "Once I file an inquiry with the county, we can request an appraisal of the damages. And Mrs. Mitchell—" She paused, her tone softening. Don't let them make you feel guilty for protecting what's yours. Lisa nodded slowly. I stopped feeling guilty this morning. They shook hands, firm and deliberate. When Lisa stepped back out into the savannah sunlight, the wind carried the scent of rain again, but now it smelled less like threat, more like cleansing. The city felt alive, humming under her feet. She walked a few steps, then stopped and pulled the deed from her folder. The paper fluttered slightly in the breeze, the ink still bold after all these years. She folded it carefully, tucked it into her purse, and pressed her hand against it, like armor. As the taxi pulled away, she looked out at the streets lined with old houses, each one holding stories of endurance. Hers was just beginning its next chapter. But when she turned back toward her own reflection in the car window, her eyes were colder than before, focused, deliberate, and no longer mourning. She whispered, almost smiling, "Now let's see who really owns this house." The house was unnervingly quiet when Lisa returned that afternoon. She could hear only the faint ticking of the thermostat and the hum of the refrigerator, mechanical, lifeless sounds that had replaced the rhythm of a real home. She set her purse on the counter, straightened her spine, and waited. Claire's voice came first, drifting from the living room, bright and careless. "Jason, I told you we should paint that hallway again, something cooler. The white looks yellow in this light." Jason mumbled something indistinct. Lisa stepped into the doorway. "No need to worry about paint right now," she said evenly. Both heads turned. Claire smiled with automatic politeness. Jason looked wary, like he already sensed what was coming. Lisa's tone was calm, too calm. "We need to talk." Claire's smile flickered. "Of course. What about?" Lisa reached into her bag and placed a slim folder on the coffee table. She slid the top page free, the property deed, crisp and deliberate. "About this?" she said. Jason frowned, leaning forward. "Mom, what?" "I met with an attorney this morning," Lisa interrupted. "Linda Foster. She reviewed the records." She tapped the paper once. "This house belongs entirely to me. Legally, you had no right to alter it, sell anything from it, or touch its equity without my written permission." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Claire laughed, short, sharp, incredulous. "You went to a lawyer?" She shook her head like Lisa had suggested joining a book club. "Lisa, come on. You wouldn't actually—" "I already did." Jason's eyes widened. "Mom." Lisa turned her gaze on him, steady and cold. "You should have stopped her." He opened his mouth, then faltered. "We thought— You thought wrong." The silence landed like a blow. Claire's face hardened, amusement gone. "You're overreacting," she said, the sweetness stripped from her voice. "We were helping you. This house was falling apart." Lisa stepped closer, the soft thud of her cane punctuating each word. "You stripped it bare, Claire. You sold my family's history like it was junk at a garage sale." Claire's voice sharpened. "I improved it. You should be grateful. I spent weeks managing contractors, planning every detail. Jason can tell you how much work." "Jason can tell me," Lisa cut in, "how it feels to sign forms he didn't read." Jason looked up sharply. "What forms?" Lisa's eyes didn't leave Claire. "The ones she filed when she hired that designer. The city permits, the supply orders. I'll be requesting them all through my lawyer." Claire crossed her arms, forcing a laugh again. "You're bluffing." Lisa smiled faintly. "You're welcome to find out." Across the room, Emily's small face peeked from behind the couch, eyes wide, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Lisa's heart twisted for a moment, but she didn't waver. This wasn't about keeping peace anymore. Jason rubbed a hand over his face. "Mom, please. You're talking about legal action against your own family." Lisa's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "Family doesn't steal from you and call it love." Claire stepped forward, her tone rising. You really think a lawyer's going to fix this? We've invested thousands into this place. Our money. You're not the only one with a stake here. Lisa met her eyes, unblinking. According to the deed, I am. Claire froze. Just for a second, her composure cracked, a flicker of something that looked suspiciously like fear. Then she recovered, tossing her hair and smirking. Fine. If you want to play hardball, go ahead. But you'll regret dragging your own son into this. Jason tried to speak again, but Lisa raised a hand. He made his choice when he stood silent. The air felt electric now, charged with something that hummed beneath words. Claire's veneer of control slipped further, her fingers tapped against her arm too fast. Lisa turned toward the stairs, her voice soft but cutting. You've taken enough from me. I won't let you take another thing. As she started up the steps, Claire called after her, voice trembling between anger and panic. You can't win this, Lisa. You don't know what you're doing. Lisa paused halfway up and looked over her shoulder. Her tone was ice. On the contrary, I finally do. Behind her, Jason and Claire stood in uneasy silence, the deed still lying open on the table like evidence at a crime scene. From the landing, Lisa caught sight of Emily peering out again, eyes full of questions she couldn't yet answer. Lisa gave her a small, reassuring nod before disappearing into the hallway. Upstairs, she closed her bedroom door and leaned against it, breathing hard. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from the sheer force of what she'd unleashed. Then, on the edge of her desk, she noticed her phone vibrating. A text from Harold. You might want to check the county records. Something strange came up in your property file. Lisa stared at the message, her pulse starting to race again. She sat down, opened her laptop, and began typing, pulling up the county assessor's website. And when the document appeared, her breath caught in her throat. A lien notice. Filed 6 months ago. Secured against her home. The borrower's signature, Claire Mitchell. Lisa's hand trembled as she scrolled, the full weight of it dawning on her. Claire hadn't just redecorated her home. She'd borrowed money against it. Without permission. Without shame. Downstairs, a burst of laughter echoed faintly. Claire's voice. Too bright. Too brittle. Lisa's lips pressed into a thin line. The tremor in her hand stopped. This wasn't over. Not even close. The following morning, Savannah's sky hung low and heavy, bruised with gray. Lisa stood at Linda Foster's office window, watching the drizzle streak down the glass. Behind her, the lawyer's printer hummed, spitting out copies of county records Lisa wished didn't exist. Linda placed the papers on the desk between them, her expression unreadable. It's worse than we thought, she said quietly. Your daughter-in-law didn't just hire a contractor under your name. She leveraged the property itself. Lisa sank into the chair, her cane leaning against her knee. You mean she borrowed against it, Linda finished. A home equity loan, signed 6 months ago. The collateral is your house. The word collateral hit Lisa like a physical blow. She reached for the papers, her fingers brushing the cold ink. There it was again. Claire's looping signature, proud and confident, right above the line marked borrower. Beneath it, in shaky penmanship, Jason's. Her voice came out hoarse. He signed too. Linda nodded. Yes. Co-signer. But look here. She pointed to the fine print. The deed lists you as the sole owner, which means this loan is unauthorized. They can't legally encumber your property without consent. Lisa felt her pulse in her throat. And if the bank doesn't know that? Then they've been defrauded, Linda said, folding her arms. But the good news is, you're on solid ground. The liability's not yours. Lisa nodded mechanically, the words sliding through her like water through stone. Solid ground, she repeated, though she felt anything but. When she left the office, the rain had deepened into a steady downpour. The cab ride home blurred into gray. By the time she stepped through her front door, the house no longer felt like it belonged to her at all. It felt like a stage set, something cheap and fragile. Claire was in the kitchen, phone to her ear, voice bright and false. "Yes, of course, I'll have the payment by Friday. No, the remodel's not done yet. Just a few touch-ups." She turned and froze when she saw Lisa standing there. Jason looked up from the table, guilt flashing across his face before he masked it. Lisa dropped the manila folder onto the counter. The sound cracked through the room. "Tell me you didn't," she said. Claire blinked, recovering her smile too quickly. "Didn't what?" Lisa pulled out the paperwork and slid it across the marble island. "Borrow money. Against my house." The smile faltered. "Lisa, let's not dramatize." Jason stood, palms raised. "Mom, please. Just listen." "No," Lisa snapped, her voice sharp as the lightning that flashed outside. "You listen. You signed my home away to a bank. You used what Daniel and I built, what we earned, as collateral for your vanity project." Jason's voice broke. "She said it was temporary, just to cover the renovation costs, until we could refinance." Lisa's eyes narrowed. "You didn't even read what you signed, did you?" He didn't answer. Claire crossed her arms, tone defensive now. "You act like I stole from you, Lisa. It's still your house. We just optimized your equity." "Optimized?" Lisa repeated, trembling with disbelief. "You mortgaged a dead man's legacy so you could have white walls and glass railings." Claire's jaw tightened. "You're being emotional." Lisa slammed her palm against the counter, the sound echoing through the room. "I'm being human. Something you wouldn't understand if it was etched into marble." Jason stepped forward, his voice cracking. "Mom, I didn't mean—" But she turned on him, eyes glistening, not with tears, but fury. "You didn't stop her. You watched her gut this house, our history, and now you've let her sell it piece by piece to pay her debts." "Lisa, please." She shook her head. "No. You two have done enough." She turned and walked out into the rain, her cane striking the porch like a metronome of defiance. The downpour drenched her in seconds, but she didn't care. Her feet carried her across the street to Harold's porch, the air thick with ozone and betrayal. Harold opened the door before she could knock. One look at her face, and he knew. "They did it, didn't they?" She nodded, trembling from more than the cold. "They borrowed against it. My house. Without me." He exhaled, slow and bitter. "Then they've trapped themselves, not you." Lisa's voice was small, hollow. "It doesn't feel that way." Harold handed her a towel, guiding her to sit. "You've got something they don't, Lisa. The truth. And paper to prove it. They're the ones standing in quicksand now." Lisa looked out at the sheets of rain hammering the street, the house across the way, glowing like a ghost. Her pulse steadied. "Then I'll let them sink." Harold gave a grim smile. "That's the spirit." Lisa's gaze lingered on the house, rain streaking the windows like tears. The place she'd once called home had become something else entirely. Tainted, wounded, unrecognizable. No longer a sanctuary, a battlefield, and she intended to win it. Days passed with the tense quiet of a house waiting for something to explode. Claire moved through the rooms like nothing had happened, bright, brittle, pretending normalcy could erase the storm she'd unleashed. Jason stayed longer at work, coming home late, eyes shadowed, voice subdued. Only Emily seemed to notice the invisible war that had split the house in two. Lisa kept to herself, her calm so steady it unnerved everyone. She spent her mornings walking the perimeter of the house, memorizing every crack, every nail, every place where Daniel's work still showed through beneath the glossy renovations. It grounded her, reminded her that under Claire's sterile design, the bones of her life still stood firm. One evening, as cicadas sang in the humid dark, Lisa heard a soft knock on her bedroom door. "Come in," she said, closing her journal. Emily slipped inside, holding something clutched to her chest, a stack of printed pages, edges crinkled. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I found these in Mom's office." Lisa frowned. "Sweetheart, what are they?" Emily came closer and laid the papers on the bed. Receipts, emails, pictures of stuff she sold. I saw her delete some files from her laptop, so I printed them first. Lisa's heart clenched. "Emily, I know I shouldn't have looked," the girl rushed on, "but she said mean things about you. She said you were too old to understand asset management, and she told Dad that if you made trouble, she'd make sure you never got to stay here again." The words hit Lisa like a slap. For a moment, she could only stare at her granddaughter's small, shaking hands. Then she reached out and drew the girl into a hug, tight, fierce, protective. "You did the right thing," she murmured into her hair. "I'm so proud of you." Emily sniffed. "Are you mad at them?" Lisa's voice was steady but low. "I was. Now I'm done wasting anger." She thumbed through the pages, her breath catching as she recognized item after item. Her mother's china listed on a resale site, Daniel's tool chest tagged as vintage find. Claire's name appeared again and again beside payment confirmations and shipment receipts. Evidence. Lisa felt something shift inside her, not fury this time, but focus. "Thank you, Emily," she said softly. "Now, I need you to be careful. Don't let your mother know you gave me these." Emily nodded solemnly. "I won't." Lisa smiled faintly. "You're stronger than they realize." After Emily left, Lisa organized the papers into a neat folder, sliding it into her drawer beside the deed. Her small arsenal was growing. By the next afternoon, Harold had stopped by with another ally, Martha Lewis, chair of the neighborhood association. Martha was the kind of woman who ran on gossip and good intentions, her voice a blend of syrup and steel. "Claire's been busy showing off her designer home to anyone with eyes," Martha said, sipping sweet tea on Lisa's porch. "But people are starting to talk. I might have mentioned she didn't exactly pay for it fair and square." Lisa looked up, one eyebrow raised. "Might have." Martha grinned. "Savannah's a small town, honey. Whispers move faster than hurricanes. Give it a week, and that woman's reputation will be dustier than your attic used to be." Harold chuckled beside her. "Consider it community restitution." Lisa smiled, but her mind was already moving elsewhere, thinking of Linda, of court filings, of the quiet power of truth once it started rolling downhill. By evening, Jason came home late again. He didn't go near Lisa, didn't meet her eyes. She heard his footsteps pause outside her door, the hesitation of a man too ashamed to knock. Then he moved on. Downstairs, Claire's laughter rose from the living room. Strained, brittle, trying too hard. Lisa didn't need to look to know she was calling someone, probably trying to salvage her social footing. Lisa sat at her desk, opening her journal to a fresh page. The night was hot, the air heavy with magnolia and unease. Her handwriting was slower this time, deliberate. They think silence means surrender. She paused, staring at the ink, but silence sharpens the blade. She closed the book gently, her reflection faint in the window. Outside, the streetlights glowed soft amber over the wet pavement, and across the street, Harold's porch light flickered on, a quiet signal of solidarity. Lisa sat back, calm spreading through her like cool water. She no longer needed to raise her voice. The tide had already turned in her favor, quietly, invisibly. Tomorrow, she'd meet Linda again. And this time, she wouldn't come as a client seeking help. She'd come as a woman ready for war. The house creaked around her, settling under the humid night. and for the first time since the renovations began, the sound didn't hurt. It was alive again, waiting. The next Saturday arrived draped in Georgia heat and forced smiles. Claire had decided to host another gathering, as she called it, a chance to showcase the house for friends and neighbors. Her voice carried through the halls all morning, barking directions at caterers, checking her reflection in the mirror, perfecting every surface that might reflect her triumph. Lisa said little. She sat on the front porch with her cane resting across her lap, watching strangers carry trays of hors d'oeuvres through the door she used to open for family. She could have stopped the charade, ended it with one phone call to her lawyer, but not yet. There were better ways to let truth travel, quietly, socially, ruinously. By dusk, the living room was packed. The crowd shimmered under warm light and clinking glasses. Claire floated from guest to guest, laughter ringing too loudly too often. "It's all original now," she bragged. "Everything restored. Well, redesigned. The house needed a second life." Lisa lingered near the staircase, unseen but not unnoticed. Her pale blue dress was simple, her hair swept back neatly. The only accessory she wore was the small gold locket Daniel had given her 40 years ago. She didn't need to speak tonight. She just needed to watch. Jason played the obedient host, forcing smiles as neighbors asked about renovation budgets and permit approvals. He answered vaguely, eyes darting toward Claire for help. Sweat gathered at his collar despite the air conditioning. Lisa waited until the second round of champagne before making her move. The buffet table near the patio was lined with perfectly symmetrical dishes: salmon bites, bruschetta, cucumber rounds so precise they could have been measured with a ruler. Beside the display sat a stack of home magazines featuring Claire's modern makeover in proud, glossy photos. Lisa slipped past the chatting guests, cane tapping softly against the tile. From her purse, she drew 2 folded envelopes, each marked in clean, steady handwriting. She placed one atop the magazines and the other beneath the crystal bowl of lemon slices. Inside were copies of the property deed, dated and notarized, and the receipts Emily had printed, each showing Claire's name beside the sale of Lisa's heirlooms. Then she stepped back, calm and deliberate, and poured herself a glass of iced tea. It started slowly. A neighbor, Martha's friend from the association, spotted the papers first. Curiosity led to reading. Reading led to whispering. Within minutes, murmurs rippled across the room like a spreading current. "Wait, Lisa's the owner? She sold her mother's quilt? Is this even legal?" Claire's voice faltered mid-sentence as she noticed the shifting energy. Conversations dulled, heads tilted. A woman she'd been bragging to about the historic preservation of the house gave her a pitying smile and stepped away. "Jason," Claire hissed under her breath, panic flaring behind her perfect smile. "What's happening?" Jason followed her gaze to the buffet. The sight of the open envelopes drained the color from his face. He glanced toward Lisa, who simply raised her glass in a small, serene gesture of acknowledgement. Claire hurried across the room, trying to collect the papers, but it was too late. Martha was already showing them to a group near the window, her voice carrying just loud enough to be overheard. "Says here the house is solely in Lisa's name. And look at these invoices. Resale transactions, all signed by Claire." Claire's hand shook as she snatched the papers away. "That's private. You shouldn't. These are copies. Not." But her voice cracked, and in that moment, everyone saw it. The panic beneath her polish. Jason ran a hand over his jaw, eyes down. "Claire," he murmured, "maybe we should—" She cut him off with a glare, but the damage was done. The party had turned. Conversations fractured into awkward silence. Guests excused themselves one by one, their politeness tinged with discomfort. Lisa didn't move. She remained in her chair by the window, the picture of composure, sipping her tea while the air around her shifted from bright to brittle. Claire finally turned on her, voice trembling. "You did this. You humiliated me in my own house." Lisa looked up, her tone soft but unflinching. "Correction. My house." Claire's breath hitched. Jason stepped back, his expression one of quiet defeat. Lisa rose slowly, setting her empty glass on the table. "You've spent months stripping away everything that mattered here," she said. "Tonight, I only stripped away your illusions." Claire's eyes flashed with rage, but her voice faltered. Around them, the house hummed with silence. The sound of masks dropping, of reputations unraveling. Lisa leaned in slightly, her voice low enough for only Claire to hear. "The truth has longer legs than lies, dear. It always catches up." Then she turned and walked toward the front door, the guests parting instinctively as she passed. The night air met her like freedom, warm, thick, and alive with cicadas. Behind her, Claire's voice broke through the noise, half shouted, half desperate. "You think this is over, Lisa?" Lisa paused on the porch, her silhouette framed in the doorway's light. Without turning around, she said, "It's only just begun." And as she stepped into the dark, the last of the guests followed her gaze, not toward Claire, but toward the quiet, unshakable woman who had just rewritten the story of that house in a single, silent strike. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and rain, a mix of old bureaucracy and fresh consequence. Lisa stood at the foot of the wide marble steps, her cane planted firmly, her expression calm. Harold waited beside her in his pressed jacket, while Linda Foster adjusted her briefcase strap and said, "You ready?" Lisa nodded once. "I've been ready since the day she painted my house white." Inside, courtroom 3 buzzed with muted whispers. Claire sat at the defendant's table, dressed in tailored confidence, charcoal suit, pearl earrings, a carefully constructed expression of indignation. Jason sat beside her, shoulders tight, gaze locked on the floor. The clerk called the case, Mitchell versus Mitchell, property misuse and unauthorized encumbrance. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and little patience for theatrics, shuffled through her papers. "All right, let's hear it." Linda stood, clear and steady. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Lisa Mitchell, is the sole owner of a property located at 221 Wilton Street. The defendants, her son and daughter-in-law, initiated major structural renovations, liquidated personal assets belonging to my client, and secured an unauthorized loan using the property as collateral. We are here to establish rightful ownership and demand restitution for both tangible and emotional damages." The judge's brow lifted slightly. "Unauthorized loan?" "Yes, Your Honor. Signed by Mrs. Claire Mitchell without the owner's consent." Across the aisle, Claire gave a short, dismissive laugh. Her attorney, a slick man with 2 white teeth, stood. "Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding, a family dispute. Mrs. Mitchell here," he gestured toward Claire, "was simply managing household improvements on behalf of her mother-in-law. There was no ill intent." Lisa watched, silent, her face unreadable. The judge looked unimpressed. "Managing improvements by mortgaging property she doesn't own?" Claire's lawyer faltered. "It was an administrative oversight." "An oversight worth $187,000? Linda interjected smoothly, sliding a document toward the bench. "The lien, Your Honor. Filed without consent. Signed by both defendants." The judge examined it, eyes narrowing. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, turning toward Claire, "did you or did you not take out this loan?" Claire smiled, brittle. "It was meant to increase the home's value. We all benefit from that. My husband's mother was recovering from a fall. We thought it best to modernize." Lisa's voice cut through the courtroom like glass. "You modernized theft." Claire's head whipped around, eyes flashing. "You should be thanking me. That house was a mausoleum. I gave it life. Order, the judge snapped, gavel striking once. Mrs. Mitchell, you will address the court, not your mother-in-law. Claire's cheeks flushed red, but she forced a smile, leaning toward her lawyer. Jason still hadn't looked up. When it was Lisa's turn to testify, she moved to the stand with quiet dignity. Linda arranged the stack of documents before her. Receipts, photographs, deeds, and the proof Emily had rescued from the shadows. Lisa took the oath and settled in. Her voice never trembled. I built that house with my husband, every nail, every floorboard. I trusted my son and his wife to care for it while I recovered. Instead, they gutted it, sold my heirlooms, and signed my name away. They called it help. I call it betrayal. The room was silent except for the scratching of the court reporter's pen. Claire shifted in her chair, jaw tightening. This is emotional manipulation, she muttered. The judge looked over her glasses. It's testimony, Mrs. Mitchell. You'll have your turn. Jason finally lifted his head. His eyes met Lisa's for a fleeting second, shame and something deeper flickering there, then dropped again. Linda rested a hand on Lisa's shoulder as she stepped down from the stand. You did fine, she whispered. An hour later, the judge returned from chambers. The verdict was swift, clean, and merciless. The court finds that the defendants acted without consent or legal authority. The lien and loan are null and void. All debts incurred are the responsibility of Claire and Jason Mitchell. Effective immediately, they are to vacate the premises and surrender the property deed to Mrs. Lisa Mitchell. Restitution for damages will be determined in a separate hearing. The gavel struck once, final. Claire's face went white. You can't, she started, rising to her feet. But Jason caught her arm, voice hollow. It's over, Claire. No, she hissed, jerking away. Not like this. Across the aisle, Lisa gathered her papers slowly, methodically. The sound of the folder snapping shut was louder than any outburst Claire could muster. As she turned to leave, the judge's voice followed her. Mrs. Mitchell, she said, a rare softness in her tone. I hope your home brings you peace again. Lisa nodded once. It already has, Your Honor. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled like rain again, but lighter now, cleansed. Harold was waiting by the car, hat in hand. How'd it go? Lisa handed him the folder, her smile small but fierce. Justice, she said simply, and it looks good on paper. Then she looked back at the courthouse steps, where Claire stood frozen in disbelief, Jason beside her, small figures against the gray stone. Lisa turned away, her cane striking steady rhythm against the pavement. For the first time in months, every step felt like her own. The sun dipped low behind the live oaks as Lisa's taxi pulled up to the house. It was quiet now, eerily so. No more contractors, no more designer chatter, no more music bleeding from Claire's phone. The house stood still, stripped of guests, stripped of noise, waiting for what came next. When she stepped inside, the air felt heavy, like a held breath. Claire's suit jacket hung over a chair, a half-packed suitcase on the floor beside it. Jason sat at the dining table, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. The man looked smaller somehow, like the light had drained out of him. Mom, he said, when he heard her cane tap against the floor. His voice cracked on the word. We need to talk. Lisa set her purse down and looked at him. Really looked. This was the boy who once brought her wildflowers after thunderstorms, who used to help Daniel sand the porch railings in July heat. But that boy had grown into a man who'd signed her name away without flinching. Talk, she said softly, though there was no warmth in it. Jason stood and took a hesitant step forward. Please don't do this. Don't make us leave. She's scared. We can fix this. Lisa tilted her head, eyes calm but cutting. Fix this? she repeated. You sold pieces of me to strangers. You signed my home to a bank. And now that the truth's caught up, you want forgiveness because she's scared? Jason swallowed, shame darkening his face. I wasn't thinking straight. She said we could refinance, that it would make things easier for everyone. I just, I didn't want to fight with her anymore. Lisa's voice was quiet, but it cut deeper than shouting ever could. You abandoned me for her. Jason's shoulders sagged, the fight leaving him. That's not fair, Mom. No, she said. It's honest. For a long moment, the house was silent except for the creak of the air vent and the faint hum of cicadas outside. Then, from the staircase, came a small, trembling voice. Dad? Emily stood halfway down, her backpack clutched to her chest. Her eyes were red, her face streaked with tears. Is it true? We have to leave? Jason turned, trying to steady his voice. Sweetheart, it's just... for a while. Lisa stepped closer, her tone softening. Emily, listen to me. The girl hesitated, then descended the last few steps. Lisa met her halfway, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. This is your home too, she said. It always will be. No one can take that from you. Emily's lip quivered. But Mom said you hate us. Lisa knelt, slowly, painfully, and looked her granddaughter square in the eyes. I don't hate anyone. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy what's good. Sometimes, love means closing a door. Jason's voice broke from behind them. Mom, please, don't make her choose. Lisa rose carefully, gripping her cane. She doesn't have to. You already did. The sound of a car horn outside broke the silence. Claire's voice called from the doorway, sharp, impatient. Jason, the car's running. He looked between them, his mother, unyielding and composed, and his daughter, trembling between heartbreak and understanding. Then he nodded once, defeated. Come say goodbye to Grandma, he said gently. Emily threw her arms around Lisa's waist. I'll come visit, she whispered. Lisa smoothed the girl's hair, her throat tightening. I'll be right here, sweetheart. You know where to find me. When Emily pulled away, Jason's eyes met Lisa's one last time. They were glassy, desperate. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Lisa's reply was simple, but it did. He opened his mouth to say more, but nothing came. Instead, he turned, gathered the last of their bags and walked to the door. Claire stood outside, arms crossed, expression hard and unreadable. Jason paused on the threshold. Goodbye, Mom. Lisa didn't answer. She simply reached out, grasped the edge of the door and closed it behind them. The latch clicked, final and precise. A small, perfect sound of closure. For a long time she stood there staring at the door, her reflection faint in the glass. The quiet pressed against her chest. Then, slowly, she turned and walked through the house. The empty rooms echoed faintly, but for once, the emptiness didn't ache. It felt like space, like possibility. In the kitchen, she poured herself a glass of water, her hand steady. Through the window, she watched the taillights disappear down the oak-lined street. A gust of wind rustled the magnolia outside, and she whispered to no one in particular, Rest now, Daniel. We've got it back. Grief flickered in her eyes, but beneath it, beneath the sorrow and the silence, there was something fierce, something clean, triumph. She reached for her journal, opened to the newest page, and wrote just one line. The house is mine again. But even as the ink dried, she knew. Her fight wasn't only about walls and deeds. It was about legacy, and she intended to guard it with everything she had left. The house creaked softly in reply, like an old friend finally exhaling. Spring came slow to Savannah that year, but when it arrived, it brought the kind of warmth that made the air hum again. For weeks, Lisa woke before sunrise, moving through the house in quiet determination. The once sterile rooms were beginning to look like themselves again, alive, imperfect, real. Harold was there nearly every morning, toolbox in hand, humming old country songs as he worked. "You sure you want to keep this old trim?" he asked one day, running a hand over the dented baseboard. Lisa smiled faintly. "Daniel put that dent there, moving the piano in '85. I'd rather keep the memory than the paint." He chuckled. "Can't argue with that." Together, they sanded the scuffed floors, repainted the kitchen cabinets in soft cream, and replaced the harsh glass fixtures with warm amber bulbs that filled the rooms with gold light. Every hammer tap, every brush stroke felt like breathing life back into something that had been gasping for too long. Word of Lisa's quiet rebuilding spread through the neighborhood. The same neighbors who'd once whispered about the scandal now appeared at her door with offerings: a vintage end table, a box of old books, a chipped porcelain vase that had belonged to someone's grandmother. Martha arrived one afternoon with a folded quilt draped over her arm. "Found this at the thrift store," she said softly. "Don't know if it's yours, but it looked like something you'd love." Lisa unfolded it, breath catching as she saw the hand-stitched initials in the corner. EM. The colors were faded, the fabric worn thin, but it was hers. Her mother's. She pressed it to her chest, tears pricking her eyes. "It found its way home," she whispered. "Or maybe," Martha said with a knowing smile, "you made enough noise for the world to listen." By late afternoon, the quilt hung once more across the back of the old couch, a splash of color against the soft light streaming through the windows. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and sawdust. Familiar, comforting. A few days later, Emily arrived after school, shy at first, clutching a small box of paints. "Mom said I could visit on weekends," she murmured. Lisa's heart swelled, but she kept her tone steady. "I'm glad you're here. I was thinking the living room could use some color." "What do you think?" Emily's eyes brightened. "Can I paint?" "Only if I get to help," Lisa said. They spread newspapers across the floor, dipping brushes into jars of sunlight yellow and sky blue. Emily painted wild, joyous strokes on an old wooden chair, while Lisa filled in the cracks of the window trim. The laughter that filled the room was easy, unforced, the kind that didn't need permission. At one point, Emily looked up, face smudged with paint. "Grandma, it feels different in here." Lisa paused, her brush midair. "How so?" "It feels like it's breathing again." Lisa smiled. "It is." When Harold stopped by later that evening, he found them sitting on the floor surrounded by open paint cans and half-eaten cookies. "Looks like I'm out of a job," he said, grinning. Lisa laughed, a sound that felt strange and right all at once. "Hardly. There's still that banister with your name on it." As the sun sank, the house seemed to exhale with them. The shadows stretched long and soft across the floor, wrapping the furniture in warmth. Lisa leaned back in her chair, listening to the sound of crickets rising outside. For the first time since Daniel's passing, the silence didn't ache. It settled gently around her, familiar and forgiving. She ran her fingers over the edge of the quilt, the faint stitching catching the last of the light. Somewhere in that quiet, she could almost hear Daniel's voice. Low, amused, steady. "You did good, Lise." She smiled toward the ceiling. "Took me a while, but I got there." Harold looked up from packing his tools. "What was that?" Lisa shook her head. "Nothing. Just an old promise kept." He gave her a look of quiet understanding and tipped his cap. "See you tomorrow." When the door closed, Lisa wandered through the rooms one last time before bed. The air smelled of home again, of lemon polish, worn wood, and memory. She stood in the doorway of the living room, watching the soft glow spill over the walls, and exhaled. For the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel like a reminder of what she'd lost. It felt like a reflection of what she'd reclaimed. Lisa whispered to the rooms and to herself alike, "We're whole again." And in that fragile golden silence, she truly was. The first light of morning crept gently across Savannah, soft as breath over the river. The air was cool, still tinged with dew, carrying the scent of magnolia and wood smoke. Lisa stood on her porch wrapped in Daniel's old flannel robe, a mug of coffee warming her hands. The house behind her creaked and settled like it always had, alive again, even in its quiet. The floorboards under her feet were familiar, forgiving. A breeze drifted through the open windows, stirring the lace curtains she'd rehung the week before. It carried the faintest whisper of paint, lemon oil, and spring air. Her gaze wandered across the yard. The flower beds had started to bloom again, small bursts of color pushing through last season's neglect. Harold had rebuilt the porch steps, though he'd left the faint carving Daniel made years ago, LM plus DM, right there on the bottom riser. Lisa smiled and traced the initials with her toe, her heart catching in that quiet, peaceful ache that no longer hurt to feel. Inside, the clock chimed 6, the soft, uneven rhythm, the one her father had built decades ago, echoed through the halls. For months that silence had been unbearable. Now it was music. Footsteps padded behind her. "Grandma?" Lisa turned to see Emily in her pajamas, hair a sleepy mess, eyes still half closed. She crossed the porch, barefoot, and leaned against her grandmother's side. Lisa wrapped an arm around her, feeling the small weight press in, grounding her even more firmly to the moment. "It's early," Lisa murmured. "You should still be in bed." Emily shook her head and looked toward the horizon. The sky was melting into gold. "I wanted to see the sunrise with you." Together they watched the light spill over the rooftops, touching the tips of the live oaks first, then the porch rail, then the wide front windows. The house glowed from within, as if the morning itself recognized what it had survived. Emily sighed, smiling softly. "It's perfect now." Lisa's throat tightened. "Perfect?" "Yeah." The girl nodded, earnest. "It feels happy again." Lisa brushed a strand of hair from her granddaughter's face. "You know, I used to think a house was just walls and wood. But it's more than that. It keeps the stories we forget to tell." Emily leaned her head against her. "Like yours and Grandpa's?" Lisa nodded. "And yours too. Every time you're here, you add another story." The words settled between them, gentle as the morning light. For a while neither spoke. The city was waking now. Distant car engines, the sound of church bells somewhere downtown, the hum of a new day unfolding. Lisa glanced through the front window. The living room gleamed softly in the rising sun, the quilt on the couch, the rocking chair beside the window, the watercolor Emily had painted now framed above the mantel. It was all simple, humble, imperfect, and utterly theirs. She thought briefly of Claire and Jason. Somewhere across town, their lives were unraveling in silence, but the thought didn't sting anymore. Anger had burned itself out, leaving behind only clarity. Some losses were meant to make space for what truly mattered. The world outside was golden now, and the house seemed to breathe with it. Lisa exhaled slowly, feeling something deep inside her unclench for the first time in years. Harold's voice floated faintly from the street as he waved from the sidewalk, holding a brown paper bag. "Morning, ladies. Fresh biscuits." Lisa waved back, laughing softly. "He'll never let me skip breakfast again," she said. Emily grinned. "He likes you." Lisa arched a brow. "He likes my coffee, maybe." The girl giggled, and the sound wrapped around the porch like sunlight. Lisa joined in, the laughter coming easy. natural. When Harold reached the steps, Lisa turned back toward the house. The light had reached every corner now, glinting off glass, brushing the walls with warmth. She whispered, more to the house than to anyone else, "We're home again." For a heartbeat, it felt as if the walls themselves answered, a faint, familiar creak, like old wood sighing in relief. Lisa smiled. She set her coffee on the railing, straightened her shoulders, and took one long look at the world she had fought to reclaim. The battle was over, but the story, the living of it, was just beginning again. And as the sun lifted fully above the savannah skyline, she stepped off the porch into the golden morning, her cane tapping a steady rhythm in time with her heartbeat.